Good evening, peoples. I'm Pastor Leia. This is my co-host, Gingersnap. Welcome back to our living room for our Bible study series. We usually do this on Tuesdays, but tonight, it being Good Friday, I had a specific piece of art that didn't really seem appropriate for this coming Tuesday, as will become apparent in a moment. So today is Good Friday, the day of the Christian calendar when we commemorate the crucifixion or execution of Jesus. The way that we use the word good now, it usually means something more like positive. There's an older sense of the word good that is not quite as much in common usage now that means something more like holy. So it is a Holy Friday. It is not a yay, Jesus is dead Friday. I mean, I guess depending on your perspective. So tonight's gospel reading comes to us from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 27, verses 27 through 50. Hear now the word of the Lord. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand, and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink, mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they crucified him, they divided his clothes among them by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's son.'" The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. This is the word of the Lord. So we come to our time of Visio Divina with this beautiful piece for Good Friday, which wouldn't be the logical choice for this coming Tuesday. So Visio Divina is the practice of using a piece of art as a focal point as we read scriptures. So I would invite you to find the story in this piece of art and reflect on it. So where do you hear God's voice in the story? What questions are being asked in this story? What questions would you ask? Take a deep breath in and out. Continue breathing deeply as you read the image. What do you see? What stands out to you? How is the imagery cohesive with the scripture? Now take a deeper look. What parts of the image are your eyes most drawn to? Or what parts of the image did you quickly brush by or overlook? How does the image make you feel? So I wanted to read the statement that the artist, Wright Pittman, wrote about creating the piece. Lauren writes, "My research for this piece began with imagery of Christ's mockery. Image after image had contorted, almost inhuman figures torturing Christ and reveling in brutality, while Jesus was at peace. It seems the artist depicted Jesus leaning hard into his divinity, almost transcending the embarrassment, abandonment, and pain. But all I could think of when I read the text was how devastating and lonely it is to be misunderstood and made to be a joke. I felt that in the last moments of Jesus' life, he'd be thrust into his humanity." An art piece that was particularly intriguing to me was Christ of St. John of the Cross by Salvador Dali. It has such a harsh downward angle on the cross. It visually connected me to Christ's mockery in a new way. It pushed me to consider different perspectives from which artists and people of faith have been engaging with this horrifying event, both physically and theologically. One visual perspective I couldn't find was one looking directly down on Jesus' face. At first I thought of this as the ultimate position of mockery, looking down Jesus' nose during the most excruciating moments of his 33 years. Everyone mocked him. It must have felt like this mockery was closing in on him. I wonder what his internal world was like. Were there parts of him echoing the mockery of the soldiers, the chief priests, the scribes, the elders, the bystanders? As I began to sketch Christ from this perspective, my thoughts and feelings about the piece took a hard turn. I was thinking about the text as I was holding my 5-month-old little boy. He had a fever and was inconsolable. I felt desperate to offer him comfort and solace. It felt like my heart was breaking open. And then it occurred to me, this perspective I was drawing was not a position of mockery. It was metaphorically the perspective of God the Creator, looking down at her Son who was screaming out in agony. In order to find the expression on Christ's face, I referenced images of children crying. Their expressions were raw, real, and unencumbered. This perspective shift reveals something profound to me about the heart of God, and I connect with it in a new way after becoming a mother. This image represents the deep lament of God. It holds the desperation of a parent and the betrayal of a loved one. These acts of abuse, cruelty, and indignity were fired at the Creator of the universe by the very beings into whom God breathed life. Perhaps God is crying out to us, "Why have you forsaken me?" One of my colleagues, Denise Anderson, reminded me that in Jesus' crying out, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," he is quoting scripture. So I read Psalm 22 and found lament woven in with praise and humanity dancing with divinity. Instead of creating a mandala with mockery closing in on Jesus, I imaged the verses of Psalm 22. These images of grief and gratitude ripple out from Jesus' mouth and become a foundation, a grounding in his faith in this moment. In the visual, the moments of lament are faded, while the images of adoration and praise shimmer a bit more brightly. The psalm gives him the fortitude to rest and to offer up his last breath. So do you identify with the artist's reflections? How does hearing Lauren's statement change how you see the art? Is very striking piece. And I love her story about the perspective of looking down at Jesus as a beloved child from God's perspective, and God feeling abandoned as much as Jesus does by the world. So friends, in happier news, I hope you will join me Sunday morning. We're having breakfast at 8:30, and then of course service at 10. And the following week we're having a big fun egg hunt for peoples of all ages, big and small. But between now and then, the world feels like a very dark place, and it almost feels like the darkness is winning. But remember, the Good Friday is not the end of the story. There is more. Even if it can be hard to see sometimes through the darkness, there is more. This is not the end. He will rise again. Good night.